Well, with The Dark Knight getting ready to go into its 10th anniversary later this year, actually next month, I decided to finally review the Dark Knight trilogy. The ones directed by Christopher Nolan, all three of them, yep, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises. And, I'm gonna review them on the anniversaries of the days that they were released. So I guess, happy 13th anniversary, Batman Begins! Yay! Now this review of Batman Begins is going to be a little bit different. In which, really, most people who have reviewed Batman Begins, you know the praises of Batman Begins, and how it basically saved superhero movies. I mean, yeah, the X-Men movies helped out a bit, even though I wasn't a big fan of the first X-Men movie. I guess you could say the Spider-Man movies, for most people, saved the superhero genre. Even then, I just thought Spider-Man 1 was okay, and I didn't even like Spider-Man 2. So really, if you were to ask me, even though I didn't really care back then because I wasn't into movies, but if you were to take my mindset now and put it in the early 2000s, 2005, when it comes to comic book superhero movies, this is really the first one that I would probably consider great, to be honest. I can't really think of another superhero movie before Batman Begins, or at least comic book superhero movie, that was anywhere near as great as Batman Begins. Because, yeah, there were a couple of just general superhero movies that I thought were fantastic, like The Incredibles and Unbreakable, especially Unbreakable. I mean, seriously, if you have not seen Unbreakable, go check out my review of Unbreakable. It's fantastic. But those movies weren't based on comic books. Batman Begins changed superhero movies forever, and for the better, really. Because, like I said, there was a lot of schlock in the 90s and early 2000s, and even then I didn't think the superhero movies from the early 2000s were great. The one that was closest was probably, at least in the early 2000s, was X2, X-Men United, and even then I don't think it's great. It's a little bit overrated for my taste. I do like it. I really like it, but it's not great in my opinion. And yeah, there were the Tim Burton Batman movies, but even then, I really like them, but I don't think they were great. And I'm going to get back to those Batman movies here in a bit. And if you saw my top 10 movies that I didn't like that everyone else loved, you would have saw that Superman the movie was at number 1. I'm not a big fan of those Superman movies, so I'm moving on. But, yeah, so really this review is mainly going to be me comparing Batman Begins to the 1989 Batman, and explaining why I feel like Batman Begins is a far superior movie, because I told you guys in my Batman review that I would do this, and yeah, it took me a couple of years, but hey, here we are now. Why do I love Batman Begins more than Batman? Well, quite simply, Bruce Wayne is more of a defined character. Now, some will argue that it's more impactful to keep Batman's backstory in the shadows. If you were talking about like a villain or something like the Joker in The Dark Knight, I would agree, but if we're talking about the lead character, like the lead hero in a movie, I don't know. I feel like we have to see that. We probably should be seeing his struggles, his fears, and why he wants to be a hero. Well, not really be a hero per se, but really why he wants to get rid of the crime in Gotham. And I'm not saying it was done badly in Batman, like the 1989 Batman, but really, like I said, Bruce Wayne's character wasn't that well defined. And here's another reason why I feel like Bruce Wayne's character is better in Batman Begins. And it's actually going to lead into my other point when it comes to the Batman voice, which has been heavily criticized. But with Bruce Wayne in Batman Begins, he actually makes an attempt to separate himself from Batman. Because some people say that his Bruce Wayne ego in the Christopher Nolan trilogy is a little bit too obvious. Like, he acts drunk and acts ridiculous and whatnot. But I don't really see why that's a problem. Because really, that actually separates Bruce Wayne and Batman even more. Because the people who are Keaton supporters, and I do like Keaton, but I'm not a big fan of his Bruce Wayne. The reason why I feel like his Bruce Wayne is weak is because, really, he's basically Batman, but without a mask. I mean, granted, he's not punching people and whatnot, but he's still in the shadows and keeps to himself. It keeps quiet, and he's not a very social person. And just like Alfred says in Batman Begins, what's going to happen when this vigilante just somehow appears in Gotham, and yet Gotham's billionaire playboy just does nothing and just keeps to himself and doesn't go out in the public all that much? That makes it so obvious that that's Batman. At least with Batman Begins and the other movies in the Dark Knight trilogy, there is an attempt to keep Bruce Wayne separated from Batman. He acts drunk, he goes to parties, dates movie stars. He's just a rebellious person. He just doesn't give a fuck. This kind of behavior, really, why would you associate this character, this Bruce Wayne guy, with this very violent, aggressive vigilante who's going out fighting crime? Why would you associate those two? That's what makes it work. And I made a joke about this before, but really, when you think about it, it actually does make sense. It's like if Donald Trump was a superhero. Why would I assume that this guy, who really acts weird and whatnot, why would I assume he would be a vigilante fighting crime in the streets of, I don't know, a city? You see what I mean? That's what I'm talking about, the separation. You need to separate the Bruce Wayne ego with the vigilante ego. Because if the Bruce Wayne ego is very quiet and keeps to himself all the time, then it's going to be pretty obvious that Bruce Wayne is Batman, because he can afford all this. If he's acting rambunctious and acting like a doofus, then, no one would ever assume that this ridiculous guy is a superhero. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne is superior to Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne. Now, if you saw my previous Batman reviews, you would see that I would complain about Batman killing and whatnot. I'm like, no, Batman should never kill. But I will say I will retract that statement, because if I'm the guy who's always saying, hey, comic book movies should not have to be accurate to the comics, then why would I be saying that, Batman shouldn't be killing? I mean, it's kind of weird. Because really, if you look at the Tim Burton Batman movies, they never established that rule, so really, there wasn't any rule to break. And even then, in the comics, Batman has killed dozens and dozens of times. So, I'll let that slide for those Batman movies, because really, he didn't have a rule for no killing. He does, however, in the Dark Knight trilogy. And like I said, I'm not going to put that as a fault towards those movies. I will say it does make this Batman more compelling as a character, because we see that he does have his limits. Now, some people will say that I'm going to try to not get into spoilers, because even though, yeah, the movie's 13 years old, but I'm still going to be nice about it. Some people will say that there's a part where he causes a place to explode due to explosives, but I will say, in this movie's defense, his intent wasn't to kill. It's just there just happened to be explosives nearby, and he didn't know about it. So, like I said, I'll let that slide, because really, that's something that the character could not have predicted would happen, and his intent wasn't to kill. And like I said, I like seeing the detail of Batman. Batman is a very interesting character. He's one of the most interesting characters in general, in my opinion. Now, yeah, I know, if people like not knowing anything about Batman's backstory, and it's just kept in the shadows, I mean, fine, that's them. But really, if we're talking about our main character, especially in a superhero movie, I feel like this works a lot better. Especially since, when we do see his backstory and we do see his evolution to becoming Batman, we do see his hurdles. We see him get hurt. Because one of my criticisms of the Tim Burton Batman movies and you could say the same thing for the Joel Schumacher Batman movies, was that Batman always seemed like he was on top of things. I mean, yeah, he would sometimes bleed a bit, but never once does he actually get pummeled so badly to where he has to make this little comeback moment where he has to use all of his might and use everything he's got to fight someone off. He doesn't really have that in the Tim Burton Batman movies. He just always seems to be on top of things. He always seems to always know what to do at any given moment. Whereas in the Dark Knight trilogy, especially in Batman Begins, and yeah, in the other movies as well, I already said that. What am I talking about? But whatever the case, in Batman Begins, he does struggle. Whenever he does come across a problem, he has to figure out a way out of it. And that's why I love the applied sciences scene where he's going up to Lucius Fox and using a bunch of gear. Every time he comes across a problem when using that gear, he always goes back to Lucius for another thing of gear so he can evolve as a vigilante. Like, for example, when he has all this armor plating and tries to jump from one building to another, he ends up hurting himself. And so he goes to Lucius Fox for some memory cloth, which is basically this thing in the movie where, like, it's basically like regular cloth, but you put an electric current through it and it becomes rigid, therefore allowing Batman to glide. That stuff is so fascinating because I just love seeing the hero coming across a problem and having to find a way out of it. That's one of the reasons why I love The Amazing Spider-Man so much, is because whenever he came across a problem, Peter Parker, he would try to figure out a way out of that situation by evolving his equipment, by evolving his abilities. And the same thing is true with Batman Begins. And I gotta say, Thomas Wayne is like the coolest dad ever in this movie. He's so supportive and he's so likable. Why didn't I have a dad like that growing up? All I had was this racist sack of shit. Oh well, he's been dead for nearly 5 years or something like that anyway. But I digress. Let's talk about the Batman voice, which has gotten a lot of criticisms over the years. And I personally don't get it. Like, people notice it more in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. But I'm just going to use this opportunity to explain why I'm actually completely fine with this Batman voice. It's for this simple thing. It doesn't sound like Bruce Wayne. It doesn't sound like Christian Bale. It just sounds like a gravelly voice. But here's the thing. That's why it works. With Michael Keaton's Batman, whenever he talked as Batman, even though he used a little bit more of a whispery voice, it still sounded like Michael Keaton. And even Kevin Conroy, and I love Kevin Conroy as Batman, don't get me wrong, but his Batman voice just sounds like a deeper version of Kevin Conroy's voice. With Christian Bale's Batman voice, yeah, it's a little bit exaggerated, but you kind of need that if you want to try to disguise your voice. Because really, like I said, it doesn't sound like Christian Bale, it sounds like some gravelly voice. And I do believe it really does conceal the identity of Bruce Wayne really well. I do also like what they did with Ben Affleck's Batman in the current DCEU, but and it does work for that setting. In fact, I think if you were going to ask me, I feel like in some ways the Ben Affleck Batman is better than the Christian Bale Batman. But if you're going to ask me about this movie, I feel like the Christian Bale Batman voice makes perfect sense. It makes sense of why he would talk like this, because it doesn't sound anything like Christian Bale. And yeah, if you're trying to disguise your voice, I'm pretty sure just using this voice isn't going to disguise your voice. People are going to catch on pretty quickly that's just a deeper version of Bruce Wayne's voice. And I could go on and on and on about why I love Batman Begins and why I find it to be superior to the Tim Burton Batman movies. I'm especially going to get into even more praise once I get into The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. But if I'm talking about this movie as well, Batman Begins is a fantastic movie. And in my opinion, it's the first great comic book superhero movie. And so, I'm going to be giving Batman Begins a 10 out of 10. Stay tuned for my next installment of the Dark Knight Trilogy reviews coming in July, which is going to be for The Dark Knight, just in time for its 10th anniversary. So, what do you think of Batman Begins? Let me know down in the comments below what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a like, share the video so we can get the channel circulated. Don't forget to support my Patreon on my Patreon page, and if you want to see more, click this.